He told me not to open it. But the voices inside already knew my name. I'm going to tell you something that will change everything you think you know about who you are, about what was done to us, about what they took from you before you were even born. And I need you to listen carefully, because once you hear this, there's no going back to sleep, no returning to the comfortable lie you've been living. Are you ready? Because 3 nights ago, I found something on that mining road, something that wasn't supposed to be found. And the moment I touched it, the moment I looked into his eyes, I remembered. Not learned. Remembered. And that difference is everything. It started with the dreams. You know the ones I'm talking about. The dreams that don't feel like dreams at all, but like memories bleeding through from somewhere else. Somewhere ancient. I'd wake up at 3:33 in the morning, drenched in sweat, with the taste of sand in my mouth and the echo of a language I'd never learned still vibrating in my throat. In these dreams, I walked through temples that shouldn't exist. Temples with doorways too tall for humans, with symbols carved into black stone that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. And there were others with me, beings made of light and intention, communicating without words, sharing thoughts, like breath. I'd wake up reaching for something I couldn't name, grieving for a home I'd never seen, aching with a loneliness that had no source, no reason, or so I thought. My life had become a ghost of itself. I went through the motions, work, sleep, the endless scroll through other people's lives, the hollow conversations that never touched anything real. But underneath it all, there was this persistent whisper. This is knowing that I was supposed to be something more, that something had been taken from me, stolen. And the worst part? I couldn't remember what. It was like trying to recall a word that sits just on the edge of your tongue, forever out of reach, driving you slowly insane with its absence. I'd catch myself staring at the stars with tears streaming down my face and not knowing why. I'd hear certain frequencies, a Tibetan singing bowl, a specific chord progression, and my entire body would react, trembling with recognition. Recognition of what? I had no idea. But my soul knew. God, my soul knew. The synchronicities started getting aggressive. 11:11, 3:33, 4:44. Every time I looked at a clock, every license plate, every receipt total. The universe was screaming at me in numbers, and I was too afraid to listen. Too afraid of what it might mean. Too afraid of being crazy. Because that's what they want, isn't it? They want you to think you're losing your mind when you're actually finding it. They want you to dismiss the knowledge, ignore the signs, take the medication, go back to sleep, stay comfortable, stay small, stay forgotten. But I couldn't. Not anymore. So I drove. I drove out to the old mining roads where the desert meets the mountains, where cell service dies and the silence gets so thick you can hear your own heartbeat echoing off the canyon walls. I needed to think, to breathe, to figure out why I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The road was empty, the kind of empty that feels intentional, like the world had been cleared just for this moment. The sun was setting, painting the rocks in shades of copper and blood, and the shadows were growing long and strange. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was a person. Someone collapsed on the side of the road, maybe a hiker who'd gotten lost or dehydrated. But as I got closer, as I slowed the car and the headlights swept across his form, I realized this was no hiker. His skin had a texture I'd never seen on human flesh, smooth but somehow crystalline, like it was made of compressed starlight. It was cracked in places, fissures running along his arms and neck, and through those cracks, a faint blue luminescence pulsed weakly. He was dying. I knew that immediately. Not with my mind, but with something deeper. Something that recognized him. I got out of the car. The desert air hit me, still hot from the day, carrying the scent of sage and something else. Something metallic and electric, like the air before a lightning strike. He was on his side, curled around something wrapped in cloth, clutching it to his chest the way a mother clutches a child. His breathing was shallow, labored, each exhale releasing a faint shimmer into the air. And his eyes. God, his eyes. When they opened and found mine, I felt the world tilt. They were too large, too dark, filled with an intelligence that made me feel like a child. But there was something else in those eyes. Recognition. He knew me. Somehow, impossibly, he knew me. "Help," he whispered, and the word came out in English, but I heard it in my mind first, felt it in my chest before my ears registered the sound. I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands hovering over his body, not knowing where to touch, how to help. "Please," he said, and his voice cracked with something that transcended species, pain, fear, desperation. But when I reached for him, when I tried to lift him, he recoiled. Not from me, from the object he was holding. He pulled it tighter against himself, his whole body tensing, and I saw terror flash across his face. Pure, primal terror of what he was carrying. "You must not open it," he whispered, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that froze me in place. "Not until you understand." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning I couldn't grasp. Not until I understand what. But there was no time for questions. He was fading. I could see it happening, his light dimming, his form becoming less solid, like he was dissolving back into the elements. I made a decision. I slipped my arms under him, careful of the cracks in his skin, and lifted. He was lighter than he should have been, like his bones were hollow, like he was made of something less dense than flesh. The wrapped object pressed between us, and even through the cloth I could feel it. A pulse, a rhythm, like a heartbeat that wasn't quite organic. Like something alive but not living. I got him into the back seat, and as I did, his hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak but insistent, and when I looked down, I saw his fingers were too long, too elegant, each one ending in what looked almost like a crystalline nail. "There's a place," he said, his voice barely audible now. 2 miles north. Abandoned. Cabin. They won't look there. Not yet." How did he know about an abandoned cabin? How did he know any of this? But I didn't ask. I just drove. The road got rougher, narrower, until it was barely a road at all, just 2 tire tracks cutting through scrub brush and rock. And then I saw it. A structure that looked like it had been forgotten by time itself. Wood bleached gray by decades of sun. Windows dark and empty like the eyes of a skull. I pulled up as close as I could and carried him inside. The cabin smelled of dust and decay, of things left behind and never reclaimed. There was an old cot in the corner, a table with one leg shorter than the others, a fireplace filled with the remnants of someone else's warmth. I laid him on the cot as gently as I could, and he exhaled, a sound of relief mixed with resignation. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Him, this impossible being from somewhere beyond my comprehension. Me, a human who'd spent their whole life feeling like they didn't belong. And in that moment, in that silence, something passed between us. An understanding. A recognition that went deeper than words, deeper than species. We'd known each other before. Somehow, somewhere, at a time I couldn't remember, but my soul couldn't forget. "Who are you?" I finally asked, my voice sounding too loud in the stillness. He smiled, and it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. "A defector," he said. "A thief. A fool who thought he could change what was written." He coughed, and that blue light flickered from his mouth, dissipating into the air like dying stars. "But mostly, I am someone who owes a debt. To your kind, to what was done to you." What was done to us? The question burned in my throat, but before I could ask, he began unwrapping the object. His hands moved slowly, reverently, peeling back layers of cloth that looked ancient, woven from fibers that seemed to shift colors in the dim light. And then it was revealed. The bag. I don't have words adequate to describe it. It was roughly the size of a large purse, but its proportions seemed wrong, like it existed in more dimensions than my eyes could process. The material looked organic, woven from something that might have once been alive, with patterns that hurt to look at directly, that seemed to rearrange themselves when I blinked. But the most unsettling thing was the pulse. That steady, rhythmic thrumming that I could feel in my bones, in my teeth, in the base of my skull. It wasn't just vibrating. It was breathing. And as I stared at it, as my eyes traced those impossible patterns, I felt something inside me respond. A resonance. Like a tuning fork struck in a silent room, and suddenly you realize the room was never silent at all. You just couldn't hear the frequency. "What is that?" I whispered, unable to look away. The alien's hand rested on the bag, almost protectively, and I saw his fingers tremble. "This," he said, his voice dropping to something barely audible, "was forbidden among my people. The Anunnaki used it to carry their most dangerous artifact." The Anunnaki. The word hit me like a physical blow, and suddenly I was back in those dreams, standing in those impossible temples, watching ships descend from skies that weren't Earth's sky. The Anunnaki. The ancient ones. The gods who weren't gods. "What's inside it?" I asked, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. Pity, grief, and something else. Guilt. "Memory," he said. The word hung in the air like a curse. "It contains memory." I waited for him to elaborate, to explain, but he just kept staring at the bag, his expression a mixture of reverence and revulsion. "I don't understand," I said, though part of me did. Part of me that I'd been ignoring my whole life understood perfectly. "It's not a container," he continued, his voice gaining strength, urgency. "It's a living archive. It stores consciousness itself. Inside this bag are fragments of beings the Anunnaki extracted. Knowledge, emotions, lifetimes, even pieces of souls taken during genetic experiments on early humans." The room seemed to contract around me. Genetic experiments, early humans, pieces of souls. The words should have sounded insane. Should have sent me running from this cabin, from this being, from this impossible situation. But they didn't, because somewhere deep inside, in a place I'd been taught to ignore, to suppress, to medicate into silence, I knew he was telling the truth. "They called it the repository," he whispered, and his hand moved across the bag's surface in what might have been a caress or a warning. "A tool to control evolution. A tool to erase." "Erase what?" My voice came out hoarse, broken. He looked up at me, and in his eyes I saw the weight of millennia. "Awakening," he said. "They didn't just manipulate your DNA. They manipulated your memory, your awareness, your connection to what you truly are." He paused, and I watched his throat work as he swallowed. Humans weren't always as you are now. There was a time when your kind could do things, see things, know things. You were becoming something that threatened the order they'd established. So they changed you, not just physically. They reached into your consciousness, and they edited you, removed the parts that were remembered, the parts that I knew, the parts that could access what you call divine wisdom, but what is really just your birthright. I couldn't breathe. The cabin walls seemed to be closing in, the air growing thick and heavy. "That's not possible," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. Because hadn't I always felt it? That sense of something missing? That ache for abilities I'd never had but somehow mourned? Those moments when I knew things I shouldn't know, saw things I shouldn't see, felt the thoughts of others like whispers in my mind before I learned to shut it all out? "The repository," he continued, his voice growing weaker again, "was used to store what they took. When a human awakened too quickly, remembered too much, began to access the abilities that had been locked away, they came, and they used this." He gestured to the bag, and I saw his hand was shaking. "They extracted the awakening, pulled it out like a weed, and they stored it here. Thousands of them. Thousands of humans across thousands of years, all who got too close to remembering what they really were. The implications crashed over me like a wave. Every mystic who'd been silenced, every prophet who'd disappeared, every person throughout history who'd claimed to see beyond the veil, to access higher consciousness, to remember past lives. What if they weren't crazy? What if they were just remembering? And what if something had been systematically stopping that remembering? "Why?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I was asking him or the universe itself. "Why would they do that?" His laugh was bitter, painful. "Control," he said simply. "A species that knows what it is, that remembers its true nature, that can access its full potential, cannot be controlled, cannot be ruled, cannot be used. Your amnesia is their power. Your forgetting is their throne." Silence fell between us, heavy and profound. Outside, the desert night had fully descended, and through the broken windows, I could see stars. So many stars. Had they always been that bright? Or was I seeing them differently now? "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Why bring it here? Why risk—" "Because it's time," he interrupted, and there was a finality in his voice that made my skin prickle. "The cycle is ending. The awakening is happening whether they want it or not. Humans are starting to remember on their own, and they can't extract everyone. There are too many now. Too many asking questions, too many refuse to forget." He looked at the bag, then back at me. "And because of you." "Me?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "What do I have to do with any of this?" He smiled again, that sad, knowing smile. "Everything," he said. And then he said the words that shattered my reality completely. "One of these memories belongs to you." The bag reacted. The pulse intensified, the rhythm speeding up, and the surface began to glow with that same blue luminescence that leaked from the cracks in his skin. The patterns shifted, rearranged, and I swear I could hear something. Voices, distant and layered, like 1,000 people whispering at once, and underneath it all, one voice that sounded like me, but not me. A version of me that was older, wiser, more complete. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the cabin wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, that's not possible. I'm not—" "You were part of the early lineage," he said, and his voice cut through my panic like a blade. A lineage they feared, a bloodline that carried too much memory, too much potential. They tried to erase you, all of you. But memory. He reached out and touched the bag, and it pulsed brighter. Memory is eternal. It can be suppressed, hidden, locked away. But it cannot be destroyed. And yours has been waiting. Waiting for you to be ready. Waiting for this moment. I don't understand, I said. But that was a lie, too. Because I was starting to. Those dreams, those synchronicities, that persistent feeling of being more than this life, this body, this limited existence. It wasn't madness. It wasn't imagination. It was a memory, bleeding through, fighting to the surface, refusing to stay buried. "Show me," I heard myself say, and I didn't recognize my own voice. It sounded stronger, clearer, like someone else was speaking through me, someone who'd been waiting a very long time to be heard. The alien's eyes widened. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Once you see, once you remember, there is no going back. Your life as you know it will end. Everything you thought you were will be revealed as a fraction of the truth. Are you prepared for that?" Was I? Was anyone ever prepared to have their entire reality dismantled? To discover that the person they'd been was just a shadow of who they truly were? But what choice did I have? I could walk away, leave this cabin, leave this being, leave this impossible bag and its impossible contents. Go back to my life, my comfortable, hollow, half-lived life. Keep having those dreams, keep feeling that ache, keep dying slowly from a thirst I couldn't name. Or I could know. I could remember. I could become. "Show me," I said again, and this time it wasn't a request. It was a command. From someone inside me who'd been giving commands long before this lifetime, long before this body. The alien nodded slowly, and with trembling hands he lifted the bag. It seemed heavier now, or maybe more real, like it was solidifying into something my three-dimensional perception could finally grasp. He held it out toward me, and I saw fear in his eyes. Fear for me. Fear of what this would do, what it would unleash. "Place your hand on it," he said, "and don't resist. Let it show you. Let it return what was taken." I stepped forward. Each step felt like walking through water, through time itself, through layers of forgetting that had been built up over lifetimes. My hand extended, fingers trembling, and the moment before I touched it, I had one last thought, one last moment of the person I'd been. And then my palm pressed against the surface of the Anunnaki bag, and the world exploded into light. Images. No, not images. Memories, flooding into me with the force of a dam breaking. I saw myself, but not myself, standing in a temple made of black stone under a sky with two suns. I was taller, stronger. My skin had that same luminescence I'd seen in the aliens. I was communicating with others, beings of pure consciousness, sharing knowledge without words, building something important, a bridge, a gateway, a way to help humanity ascend without interference. And then they came, ships descending, the Anunnaki, not the benevolent gods of ancient myth, but something else, something that saw humanity as a resource, an experiment, a thing to be controlled. I saw the extraction. I felt it. The agony of having your consciousness torn apart, piece by piece, memory by memory, until all that was left was a fragment, a shadow, a human who would be born again and again, always feeling incomplete, always searching for something they couldn't name, always forgetting. I gasped and pulled my hand back, but the connection held. The memories kept coming, lifetime after lifetime, always awakening, always remembering just enough to be dangerous. And always, always they came. The Anunnaki or their servants. And they used the bag. They extracted the awakening, reset the soul, send it back into the cycle, trapped in amnesia, trapped in limitation, trapped in forgetting. Until now, until this moment, until this lifetime where something had shifted, where the grip had loosened, where the awakening was happening too fast, too widespread, too powerful to stop. When I finally staggered back, when the connection broke and I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air, tears streaming down my face, I wasn't the same person who'd entered this cabin. I couldn't be. Because I remembered. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Enough to know that I'd been here before. That I'd fought this fight before. That I'd been silenced before. But not this time. Not anymore. You were not supposed to remember this life, the alien said softly, and I heard the awe in his voice. But the bag knows its own. It recognizes the signature of what it holds, and it wants to return to you. It wants to make you whole. I looked at him, this being who'd risked everything to bring this to me, and I saw him clearly for the first time. Not as an alien, as a brother, someone who'd been part of that same fight, that same mission, that same desperate attempt to free humanity from the chains of enforced forgetting. "Thank you," I whispered, and the words felt inadequate for what he'd given me. He nodded, but before he could respond, his body went rigid. His eyes widened in terror, and he looked toward the door. "No," he breathed. "Not yet. Not now." And then I felt it. A vibration in the air, a pressure building. The walls of the cabin began to shake, dust falling from the rafters, and through the windows I saw them. Blue lights, bright and cold and utterly inhuman, moving through the desert with purpose, with intention, coming straight for us. "They found me," the alien said, and his voice was filled with a resignation that broke my heart. "And if they see the bag with you—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Instead, he grabbed the bag and shoved it into my hands. The moment I touched it, it pulsed, and I felt that connection again, that recognition. It knew me, and I knew it. "Run," he said, his voice urgent, commanding. "Hide it, protect it. Your awakening has begun, but it's not complete. You need time. You need to understand what you're carrying, what you're becoming." The lights were getting closer. The vibration was intensifying. My teeth were chattering from it, my bones aching. "What about you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I'll buy you time," he said, and he smiled. That same sad smile. This was always how it was going to end. I knew that when I took it, when I decided to defy them. But it's worth it. You're worth it. What you're going to do, what you're going to become, it's worth everything. The door rattled. The windows cracked. The blue light was so bright now it hurt to look at. "Go!" he shouted, and there was power in his voice. Power that pushed me toward the back of the cabin, toward a window I could climb through, toward escape. I clutched the bag to my chest, feeling its pulse sync with my heartbeat. And I ran. I ran into the desert night, into the darkness between the stars. And behind me, I heard the cabin door explode inward. I heard a sound that might have been his scream, or might have been something else entirely. And then there was light. Blinding, all-consuming light that turned night into day, that bleached the desert white, that made me stumble and fall and cover my eyes. When it faded, when I could finally look back, the cabin was empty. He was gone, vanished, taken or destroyed or ascended. I didn't know, but gone, and I was alone. Alone in the desert, with an ancient artifact pulsing against my chest. alone with memories that weren't supposed to exist, alone with the knowledge that everything I'd been taught about reality, about history, about humanity itself, was a lie. I made it back to my car somehow, drove home in a daze, the bag on the passenger seat, still pulsing, still humming with that rhythm that I now recognized as the heartbeat of stolen consciousness, stolen awakening, stolen divinity. And that night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I heard them, the voices, coming from inside the bag, whispering, calling, not threatening, not demanding, just remembering themselves, remembering me, and speaking my name, names I'd had in other lives, other times, other versions of myself that had been extracted, suppressed, forgotten. They were all still there, waiting to come home. Now I sit here, 3 days later, and the bag is still with me, still pulsing, still whispering. And every night, the voices get louder, more insistent, more clear. They're not just memories anymore. They're instructions, guidance, preparation. Because something is coming. Something the Anunnaki fear. Something they've been trying to prevent for thousands of years. The awakening, the remembering, the return of humanity to what it was always meant to be. And I'm part of it. Not by choice, not by accident, but by design. A design that was set in motion long before this lifetime, long before this body. A design that even the Anunnaki, with all their power, with all their technology, with all their manipulation, couldn't completely erase. So I have to ask you something, and I need you to really think about this. I really feel into it. Have you ever had dreams of places you've never been? Have you ever known things you shouldn't know? Have you ever felt like something was taken from you, but you can't remember what? Have you ever looked at the stars and felt homesick for a home you've never seen? Because if you have, if any of this resonates with you, if any of this feels familiar in a way that terrifies and excites you at the same time, then maybe you need to ask yourself, what did they take from you? What are you not supposed to remember? And what would happen if you did? If this story awakened something in you, if you felt that resonance, that recognition, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Because this is just the beginning. The bag is still here. The voices are still calling. And what they're about to reveal, what I'm about to remember, will change everything. Don't miss what comes next. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and get ready to remember who you really are. I should have destroyed it. That's what any sane person would have done. But sanity is a luxury you lose the moment you remember you've lived before. The first night after he vanished, I tried to sleep. I tried to pretend that everything I'd seen, everything I'd felt, everything I'd remembered was just exhaustion, just stress, just my mind playing tricks. But the bag wouldn't let me forget. It sat on my dresser, pulsing in the darkness like a second heart. And with each pulse, I heard them. Whispers. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All speaking at once in languages I shouldn't understand, but somehow did. And then, cutting through all the others, I heard my own voice. Not as I sound now, but deeper, older, speaking words that made my chest ache with longing I couldn't explain. Remember, it said. Remember what you were. Remember what they took. Remember why you came back. I sat up in bed, sweat soaking through my sheets, and stared at the bag. In the darkness, its glow was stronger, more insistent, and I realized something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't just calling me. It was changing me. I could feel it. Something inside my DNA, inside my consciousness, was waking up, activating, like a lock finally finding its key after being jammed for lifetimes. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone, desperate for something normal, something to ground me in the reality I'd known. But when the screen lit up, I saw the time. 3:33. Of course. The universe has a sick sense of humor. I got out of bed and approached the bag slowly, like it was a wild animal that might bolt or attack. Up close, I could see the patterns on its surface moving, shifting, forming symbols that looked almost like writing, almost like instructions. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, and I felt foolish talking to an object, but it didn't feel like an object anymore. It felt alive, conscious, waiting. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, and suddenly I understood. They weren't just random voices. They were answering me, telling me, showing me. The bag didn't want anything from me. It wanted to give me something, something that had been stolen, something I'd been searching for my entire life without knowing what I was searching for. But before I could touch it, before I could make that connection again, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Just 3 words. "They are watching." My heart stopped. I ran to the window, pulled back the curtain just enough to see outside. The street was empty. Normal. Suburban houses with their porch lights off, cars parked in driveways, everything exactly as it should be. Except for the black SUV parked 3 houses down. Windows tinted, engine off. But I could feel it. Someone inside, watching, waiting. How long had they been there? How did they find me? And then I remembered what the alien had said. The bag knows its own. If it could recognize me, could call me across time and space, then maybe they could track it too. Maybe bringing it here had painted a target on my back that I couldn't erase. I grabbed the bag, shoved it into a backpack, and within 10 minutes I was in my car, driving with no destination, just away. Away from that SUV, away from whoever was inside it, away from the life I'd known that was already crumbling behind me. But as I drove through empty streets, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds, a thought occurred to me. Where could I go? Where could I hide something that beings with advanced technology, with the ability to manipulate human consciousness itself, couldn't find? The answer was nowhere. There was nowhere on this planet I could run that they couldn't reach. Unless I stopped running. Unless I stopped hiding. Unless I did what the alien had told me to do. Understand it. Learn to use it. Become what I was supposed to be before they made me forget. I pulled into an all-night diner, the kind of place where nobody asks questions, and the coffee tastes like regret. I needed to think. I needed to figure out my next move. The bag sat in the booth across from me, and I swear I could feel judgment radiating from it. Or maybe that was just my own fear reflecting back. A waitress approached, tired eyes, name tag that said, "Marie." And she looked at me the way you look at someone who's clearly having the worst night of their life. "Coffee?" she asked, and I nodded. As she poured, her eyes flicked to the backpack, then back to me. "Are you running from something or toward something?" she asked, and the question hit me harder than it should have. Was I running? Or was I finally, after all these lifetimes, moving toward what I was meant to find? "I don't know yet," I said honestly. She smiled, sad and knowing. "That's usually when the real journey starts," she said, and walked away. I sat there for an hour, maybe more, watching the door, watching the windows, waiting for that black SUV to pull up. But it never did. Maybe I'd lost them. Or maybe they were just waiting, watching, letting me think I was free while they planned their next move. The thought made me sick. I pulled out the bag and set it on the table. In the harsh fluorescent light of the diner, it looked almost ordinary. Just an old bag. Worn. Ancient. Nothing special. But when I touched it, when my fingers made contact with its surface, the diner disappeared. I was standing in a desert, but not Earth's desert. The sand was red, the sky was purple, and in the distance I saw them. The Anunnaki. Tall, impossibly tall, with skin that shimmered like metal, and eyes that held no warmth, no compassion, only calculation. They were gathered around something. A human. A woman. She was screaming, fighting against restraints I couldn't see, and in their hands they held the bag. They pressed it against her chest, and I watched in horror as light began to pour out of her. Not blood, light. Her consciousness, her memories, her awakening, being extracted, being stolen, being stored. And as the light faded, as she slumped forward, empty and hollow, I saw her face. It was my face, from another lifetime, another body, but the same soul, the same as me. I gasped and pulled my hand back, and I was in the diner again. Marie was staring at me from behind the counter, concern etched on her face. "You okay, honey?" she called out. I nodded, but I wasn't okay. I was far from okay, because I'd just watched myself be erased. I watched them take everything I was and lock it away. And suddenly, the weight of what I was carrying became real. This wasn't just an artifact. This wasn't just ancient technology. This was a prison holding thousands of souls, thousands of awakenings, thousands of versions of humanity that were too powerful, too aware, too dangerous to be allowed to exist. And one of those prisoners was me. The bag pulsed, and I heard that voice again. My voice. "Free us," it whispered. "Free yourself." But how? How do you free consciousness from a container designed by beings who'd mastered reality itself? How do you undo what the Anunnaki had done? I didn't have those answers, but I knew someone who might. The alien had said he was a defector, which meant there were others. Others who'd turned against the Anunnaki. Others who wanted humanity to awaken. Others who might know how to use this bag not as a prison, but as a key. I just had to find them. And I had to do it before the ones hunting me found me first. I left money on the table and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. The air was cold, sharp, and as I breathed it in, I felt something shift inside me. Fear was still there, yes, but underneath it, something else was growing. Anger. Righteous, burning anger at what had been done. Not just to me, but to all of us. Every human who'd ever felt incomplete. Every person who'd ever sensed they were meant for more. Every soul who'd spent lifetimes searching for a home they couldn't remember. We'd been robbed, edited, diminished. And they'd made us believe it was normal. Made us believe we were the crazy ones for feeling the absence of what they'd stolen. If you're feeling that anger right now, if something in you is waking up and demanding answers, then you need to hit that subscribe button. Because what I'm about to discover, what the bag is about to reveal, will shake everything you thought you knew about human history. Don't miss it. Subscribe now. I drove until sunrise, until the desert gave way to mountains, until I found myself on a road I didn't remember taking. And that's when I saw it. A symbol carved into a rock face. The same symbol I'd seen in my dreams. The same symbol that had been on the walls of those impossible temples. It was a sign. A marker. Left by someone who knew I'd come this way. Someone who was guiding me. I pulled over and got out, the bag heavy in my hands, and as I approached the symbol, it began to glow. Faint at first, then brighter, responding to the bag's presence. And then I heard it. A voice. Not in my head this time. Out loud. Real. "You found it," the voice said, and I spun around to see a woman standing behind me. She was human, or at least she looked human, but her eyes held that same ancient quality I'd seen in the aliens. "Who are you?" I demanded, and my hand instinctively clutched the bag tighter. She smiled. "I'm like you," she said. "Someone who remembered. Someone they tried to erase. But I got away." She took a step closer, and I saw scars on her arms, faint but visible, like circuitry had been burned into her skin. "My name is Kira, and I've been waiting for you, waiting for someone to finally take the repository from them." The repository. That's what the alien had called it. "How did you know I'd be here?" I asked. She pointed at the bag. "That thing is a beacon," she said. "Anyone who's awakened can feel it. The Anunnaki can track it, yes, but so can we. So can everyone who's ever had a piece of themselves locked inside it." "There are more of you?" I asked, and hope flared in my chest. She nodded. "More than you'd think. We've been hiding, waiting, building our strength, because we knew eventually someone would steal it. Someone would be brave enough or foolish enough to take it from them. And when that happened, when the repository was finally free, the real war would begin. War. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and inevitable. "I don't want war," I said. "I just want to understand. I just want to know what they took from me." Kira's expression softened. "I know," she said, "but understanding comes with a price. And once you fully open that bag, once you let all those memories, all those awakenings flood back into the world, there's no containing it. Humanity will remember. All of us. All at once. And the Anunnaki will do anything to stop that." I looked down at the bag, feeling its pulse, hearing the whispers of thousands of souls trapped inside. Souls like mine. Souls that deserve to be free. "Then we free them," I said, and I was surprised by the certainty in my voice. "We free them all." Kira studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay," she said, "but not here. Not out in the open. There's a place, a sanctuary, where others like us have gathered, where we can open it safely, where we can prepare for what comes next." She held out her hand. "Come with me. Let me show you what you really are. What we all are when we're not being controlled." I hesitated. Could I trust her? Could I trust anyone in this new reality where nothing was as it seemed? But what choice did I have? I couldn't do this alone. Couldn't fight beings who'd been manipulating humanity for thousands of years by myself. I needed allies. I needed others who understood, who remembered. I took her hand, and the moment our skin touched, I felt it. A connection. A recognition. We'd known each other before, in another life, another time. We'd fought together, died together, and been separated by the very thing I now carried. "I remember you," I whispered, and tears filled my eyes. She squeezed my hand. "I remember you too," she said. "Welcome back, sister. Welcome home." We drove for hours, deep into the mountains, following roads that weren't on any map, until we reached a compound hidden in a valley that seemed to exist outside of normal space. There were others there, dozens of them, all with that same look in their eyes, that same awakened awareness, that same barely contained power. They gathered around as Kira led me to the center of the compound, where a circle had been carved into the stone ground. Ancient symbols surrounded it, symbols of protection, of amplification, of return. "This is where we'll open it," Kira said. "This is where we'll free what they've imprisoned. But you need to understand something first. When those memories are released, when all that stolen consciousness floods back, it won't just go to the people it was taken from. It'll go to everyone, every human on Earth will suddenly remember. We'll suddenly know. We'll suddenly awaken. And the world as we know it will end." I looked around at the faces watching me, waiting, hoping, afraid. "And what will replace it?" I asked. Kira smiled. "Something better," she said. "Something true. A world where humanity finally knows what it is, what it's capable of. A world where we're no longer slaves to our own forgetting." I set the bag in the center of the circle. It pulsed brighter now, excited, eager, like it knew its purpose was about to be fulfilled. The others formed a ring around it, around me, and I felt their energy, their intention, their desperate hope that this would work, that we could undo what had been done, that we could finally be free. But as I knelt beside the bag, as I prepared to open it fully, a sound split the air, a high-pitched whine that made everyone freeze. And then the sky above us erupted in blue light. They'd found us. The Anunnaki. And they were here. What happens when the gods you forgot come back to remind you why you were made to forget? What happens when the choice between freedom and safety becomes the choice between awakening and survival? And what happens when you realize the bag you're holding doesn't just contain stolen memories, but the key to humanity's evolution itself? The blue light didn't just illuminate the sky. I rewrote it. Like reality itself was being edited in real time, and we were the glitch they'd come to delete. Everyone in the compound froze, their faces turned upward, and I saw something I hadn't expected to see in awakened beings. Raw, primal fear. Because knowing the truth doesn't make you invincible. It just makes you aware of how much power you're up against. Kira grabbed my arm, her grip tight enough to bruise. "We're out of time," she said, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. "You have to open it now. Right now. Before they land." I looked down at the bag, still pulsing in the center of the circle, and my hands trembled. "But you said we needed to prepare. You said we needed to do this safely." She shook her head. Safe was never an option. We just didn't want to admit it. The whine grew louder, closer, and through the blue light, I could see shapes descending. Ships, 3 of them, sleek and impossible, moving in ways that defied physics, and as they lowered toward the compound, the air itself seemed to compress, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. The others in the circle began to chant, their voices rising in a language I recognized from my dreams, from those stolen memories. They were creating a barrier, a shield, buying me time. But how much time? How long could awakened humans hold back beings who'd been controlling reality for millennia? I knelt beside the bag and placed both hands on its surface. The moment I made contact, the whispers exploded into screams, not of pain, but of desperation, of souls that had been imprisoned for so long they'd forgotten what freedom felt like. And my voice, that ancient version of myself, cut through all the others. "Open us," it commanded. "Let us return. Let us become whole." But how? The alien hadn't told me how to open it, hadn't given me instructions or codes or keys. He'd just said I needed to understand. Understand what? I closed my eyes, blocking out the chaos around me, the descending ships, the chanting voices, the blue light that was growing so bright it burned through my eyelids. I focused on the bag, on its pulse, on its rhythm, and slowly I began to understand. It wasn't locked with technology. It was locked with intention, with the Anunnaki's will imposed upon it, keeping it sealed, keeping the memories contained. Which meant, to open it, I needed a stronger intention, a stronger will. I needed freedom more than they wanted control. I thought about every moment in my life I'd felt incomplete. Every night I'd woken up crying for a home I couldn't remember. Every time I'd looked at the stars and felt like an exile. Every person I'd met who had that same haunted look in their eyes, that same soul-deep loneliness that no amount of success or love or distraction could fill. We'd all been carrying this wound, this absence, this hole where our true selves used to be. And I was done. Done being less than what I was. Done living as a shadow. Done letting fear of them keep me small. I remember I whispered to the bag, and I felt something shift. I remember who I was. I remember what you took. And I'm taking it back. The bag's pulse quickened, synchronized with my heartbeat, and the surface began to crack. Not breaking, but opening. Like a flower blooming. Like a door unlocking from the inside. Light poured out. Not blue like theirs. Gold. Warm. Alive. It spiraled upward into the sky, and where it touched the blue light retreated. Dissolved. And I heard something I'll never forget. The Anunnaki ships made a sound that might have been mechanical, or might have been organic, but either way, it sounded like surprise, like fear, like they hadn't expected this, hadn't prepared for the possibility that we'd actually succeed. The light from the bag expanded, washing over everyone in the circle, and I watched as they gasped, as their bodies arched, as something returned to them. Memories, abilities, pieces of themselves they'd lost lifetimes ago. Kira fell to her knees beside me, tears streaming down her face, and when she looked at me, her eyes were different. More present, more complete. I remember everything, she breathed. Every lifetime, every extraction, every time they reset me. I remember. And then the light reached beyond the compound. I could feel it spreading, racing across the earth like a wave, touching every human consciousness, every soul that had ever been edited, ever been diminished, ever been made to forget. Billions of people, all waking up at once, all remembering, all becoming. What do you think happened in that moment, when every person on Earth suddenly knew the truth? When the veil was ripped away and humanity saw itself clearly for the first time in thousands of years? Chaos? Panic? Or something else? Something the Anunnaki had never anticipated? The ships stopped descending. They hovered, motionless, and I could feel their confusion. Their calculations are being rewritten. Because their power had always been based on one thing: our ignorance, our forgetting, our belief that we were small, limited, powerless. But what happens when that belief is shattered? When millions of humans suddenly remember they're not just biological machines, but consciousness itself wearing flesh. When they remember abilities that had been locked away, knowledge that had been suppressed, connections that had been severed. The Anunnaki had controlled us by making us forget we were divine. But you can't control divinity once it remembers what it is. One of the ships began to retreat, then another. And I realized something that made me laugh, made me cry, made me feel a joy so profound it hurt. They were leaving, not because we'd defeated them in battle, but because there was no battle to fight. You can't imprison someone who knows they're free, can't diminish someone who remembers they're infinite, can't control someone who's awakened to their true nature. The third ship lingered, and for a moment I thought they might attack, might try one last desperate attempt to put us back to sleep. But then a beam of light shot down from it. Not blue, white. And in that light, a figure descended. Tall, shimmering, Anunnaki, but different from the ones I'd seen in my visions. This one's eyes held something I hadn't expected. Respect. It landed in front of me, and when it spoke, its voice resonated in my chest, in my bones, in the space between thoughts. You have done what we believed impossible, it said. You have remembered despite our editing. You have awakened despite our suppression. You have become what we feared you would become. I stood, the bag still glowing in my hands, and I met its gaze without flinching. Why? I asked. Why did you do this to us? Why take our memories? Why keep us small? The being was silent for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across its face. Regret? Shame? Because we were afraid, it finally said. Afraid of what you would become. Afraid that you would surpass us. Afraid that we would become obsolete. The admission hung in the air, and I felt the others around me tense, their anger rising. But I felt something else. Pity. Because I understood. They'd been so focused on maintaining control, on staying superior, that they'd imprisoned themselves in fear, had spent millennia trying to stop the inevitable, trying to hold back evolution itself. You can't stop awakening, I said softly. You can delay it, suppress it, make it harder. But consciousness always finds a way. Always remember. Always becomes. The Anunnaki nodded slowly. We know that. Now, it said. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? With this power? Will you seek revenge? Will you become what we were? I looked around at the faces watching me, at Kira, at the others, at the bag still pulsing with golden light. And I knew the answer. No, I said, because that's the difference between us. You ruled through fear, through control, through making others less so you could be more. But we... I held up the bag, and its light intensified. We rise by lifting each other. We become more by helping others remember. We don't need to diminish anyone to know our worth. Anunnaki studied me, and I saw something shift in its expression. Acceptance. Then our time is over, it said, and yours is beginning. Use it wisely. And with that, it dissolved back into light and returned to the ship. All three vessels rose higher and higher until they were just points of light against the dawn sky. And then they were gone. The silence that followed was profound, sacred. We'd done it. We'd actually done it. Freed the memories. Awakened humanity. Changed everything. But as the adrenaline faded, as the reality of what we'd accomplished settled in, a new question emerged. What now? What do you do the day after the world wakes up? How do you live in a reality where everyone suddenly remembers they're more than they were told? I looked down at the bag, expecting it to be empty now, its purpose fulfilled, but it was still glowing, still pulsing, and I realized it wasn't empty at all. It had transformed. No longer a prison, but a library, a living archive of everything humanity had been, everything we'd forgotten, everything we could become. It wasn't meant to be opened once and discarded. It was meant to be a teacher, a guide, a reminder for future generations of what we'd overcome and what we'd remembered. Kira stood beside me, her hand finding mine. It's not over, is it? She asked. I shook my head. No, it's just beginning. The Anunnaki are gone, but the work of integration, of helping people understand what they've remembered, of rebuilding a world based on awakened consciousness instead of enforced forgetting, that's going to take time. She smiled. Good thing we have lifetimes of experience to draw from now. And she was right, because we weren't just individuals anymore. We were the sum of all our incarnations, all our experiences, all our accumulated wisdom. We were finally whole, Over the following days, I watched as the world transformed. Not overnight, not perfectly, but undeniably. People everywhere were having experiences like mine, remembering past lives, accessing abilities they didn't know they had, seeing through the systems of control that had kept them compliant. Some were terrified, some were ecstatic, most were confused, but they were awake. And once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep. Not really, not permanently. I started receiving messages, thousands of them, from people all over the world who'd felt the wave of awakening, who'd remembered, who had questions, who needed guidance. And I realized this was my purpose, not just to free the memories, but to help people understand them, to help humanity navigate this new reality where we finally knew what we were. The bag stayed with me. I carried it everywhere, and it became something of a symbol, a reminder of what had been stolen and what had been reclaimed. Sometimes, when I held it, I could still hear the whispers, but they weren't calling for freedom anymore. They were sharing wisdom, teaching, preparing us for what comes next. Because the Anunnaki weren't the only ones out there, weren't the only beings watching humanity's evolution. And now that we'd awakened, now that we'd stepped into our power, we'd become visible to forces both benevolent and otherwise. The universe was bigger and stranger than we'd imagined, and we were finally ready to take our place in it. One night, about a month after the awakening, I stood on a hilltop watching the stars. The same stars I'd looked at my whole life feeling homesick, but I didn't feel that way anymore. Because I understand now. I wasn't homesick for a place. I was homesick for myself, for the version of me that had been locked away. And now that I'd found her, now that we'd integrated, I was finally home. Kira joined me, and we stood in comfortable silence, two souls who'd found each other across lifetimes, across extractions, across the vast conspiracy of forgetting. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked. "The Anunnaki?" I considered it. Maybe, but not as conquerors, not anymore. They know we've changed, that we can't be controlled the way we were. And if others come? Others who want to control us? I smiled. Then we'll remember who we are, again and again, as many times as it takes. Because that's what consciousness does. It awakens, it evolves, it becomes. She nodded, and we watched as a shooting star streaked across the sky. I made a wish. Not for myself, but for everyone who was still integrating, still processing, still learning to live as their full selves. I wished them courage, patience, and the understanding that awakening isn't a destination. It's a journey, one that never really ends, because there's always more to remember, always deeper to go, always higher to rise. And that's the beauty of it. We're not finished. We're not complete. We're eternally becoming. And now, finally, we get to do it consciously, intentionally, freely. The bag pulsed against my chest, warm and alive, and I heard my own voice whisper from within it. Not the ancient version, the current one, the integrated one. "Thank you," it said, "for not giving up, for remembering, for setting us free." And I whispered back, "Thank you for waiting, for calling, for never letting me forget that I was more than what they told me." Because that's what the bag really was. Not just a repository of stolen memories, but a testament to the indomitable nature of consciousness itself. Proof that you can suppress truth, but you can't destroy it. You can delay awakening, but you can't prevent it. You can make someone forget, but you can't erase the soul's memory of what it truly is. So I'm asking you now, directly, personally, what have you forgotten? What part of yourself have you been told doesn't exist, isn't real, isn't possible? What abilities have you dismissed as imagination? What knowing have you suppressed as crazy? What memories have you buried because they didn't fit the narrative you were given? Because I'm telling you, from someone who's been on both sides of remembering those things you've dismissed, they're real. That feeling that you're meant for more? It's true. That sense that something was taken from you? It was. But here's the beautiful part. Here's what the Anunnaki never understood. What they took can be reclaimed. What was locked can be opened. What was forgotten can be remembered. You just have to be willing to look, to question, to remember. The bag is still here, still pulsing, still teaching. And every day it shows me something new, some fragment of human potential that was suppressed, some ability that was locked away, some truth that was hidden, and I share it. With anyone who's ready to hear, with anyone who's tired of living as less than they are, with anyone who's ready to remember. Is that you? Are you ready? Because this isn't just my story. It's our story. Humanity's story. Your story. The Anunnaki tried to write us as supporting characters in their narrative, but we were always meant to be the authors of our own. And now, finally, we're picking up the pen. So here's what I need you to do. Not just subscribe. Not just hit the notification bell. I need you to commit. Commit to your own awakening. Commit to questioning everything you've been told about your limitations. Commit to remembering who you really are. And then, in the comments below, I need you to share one thing. One memory. One ability. One knowing that you've dismissed or suppressed. One piece of yourself you're ready to reclaim. Write it down. Make it real. Make it witnessed. Because that's how we do this. Not alone. Not in isolation. But together. Remembering together. Awakening together.